And hello, everyone, once again. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Indonesia Community Education Festival 2026. My name is Darlene Ferika Angel, and I am one of the committee members of ICEF 2026. It is truly wonderful to see so many of you still with us, spending your weekend learning, sharing ideas, and also being part of this very important conversation. Our next session actually invites us to sit with a question that is all too often overlooked. Who are our cities really designed for? Today, we are deeply honored to be joined by Professor Laura Lundy, the Professor of Law at University College Cork and Honorary Professor of Education Law and Children's Right at Queen's University Belfast, and also Louise Stjerne Johansson, the Executive Director of the Child and Youth Friendly Governance Project, as they share their insights on reclaiming urban space, creating child and youth-friendly cities. Through this discussion, we will explore how children and young people can be active participants in shaping the spaces where they live, learn, and also grow, and why their voices are not just welcome, but essential in building more inclusive communities. I encourage everyone to stay engaged. Please ask many questions and reflect on how these ideas might apply to your own neighborhoods, schools, and also your cities as well. And after the panel, we will continue the conversation through an exciting workshop in collaboration with Urun Daya Kota. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our moderator for this session, Sadam Permana. Sadam, the stage is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Darlene. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at the Indonesia Community Education Festival 2026. My name is Sadam Permana, and I will be your moderator for today's panel discussion. I'm a law graduate, a content creator, public speaker, and also a debate coach from Indonesia. And through my work, I focus on discussing legal issues, public policy, education, and also social developments, while helping young people become more informed and engaged citizens. Today's session is titled Reclaiming Urban Space, Creating Child and Youth Friendly Cities. This is a very, very important topic, especially for us as an Indonesian citizens, you guys. So as cities continue to grow, an important question emerges. Are our cities truly designed with children and young people in mind? And how can we ensure that young people are not only beneficiaries of public policy, but also, this is the most important, but also active participants in shaping the communities they lived in? And to help us answer these questions, we're honored to be joined by our distinguished international experts, Professor Laura Lundy. Professor Lundy is internationally recognized for her groundbreaking work in children's right and participation. She is best known as the creator of the Lundy Model of Participation, a framework that has influenced governments, NGOs, and international organizations around the world. So we're going to learn so much from her, and this is a very exciting session. So bear with me, you guys. You need to keep focused on joining our discussion. So, without any further ado, let me please welcome Professor Lundy. Hi, Professor Lundy.
Hi, Sadam. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you.
How are you, Professor?
I'm good. I'm really excited to be at this festival and to hear from you all. And thank you for such a positive introduction. I love it.
My pleasure, Professor. Okay, so without any further ado, Professor Lundy, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sadam. Thanks, Darlene. I'm really very honored to have been invited to speak to you this morning. I am going to talk about the Lundy model, and then Louise is going to talk about how that approach to meaningful participation can be applied in cities and communities. So I'm going to share some slides. Oh, yeah, let's. I may have, Darlene, to get you to do it. It's asking for permission to record. And it's asked me to open my system setting. Would you be happy to share the slides I sent you?
Right, sure. Let me notice the.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. I'll stop sharing, but I'm not sharing. Okay. Yeah, no, it's asking me for permission to record, and I need to go into settings, so I'll not let everyone wait.
Please wait a moment, Professor.
Let me share the screen for a bit.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Always good to have a backup. Yeah. So I can begin by saying, I suppose, that I am a human rights lawyer, so I'm also a lawyer, and but I specialize in the rights of children, and as Saddam said, specifically their right to be heard.
Yeah, exactly.
Indonesia has ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, as you know, and it's this. We'll go to the next slide then, please. Next slide, please. So it's a human right. You know, if you're looking at any issue, including, you know, our cities and all of the issues within our cities, whether that's our roads, our parks, our infrastructure, all of these things are matters that affect children, and therefore they have a right to be heard. Next slide, please. I'm hoping you're all familiar with this. This is one of the most important provisions of the Convention, Article 12. It's a way of delivering all the other rights in the Convention. So, of course, we want our children to be protected from harm in our cities. We want them to play. We want them to learn. You know, this right is one way that we deliver all of that. Next slide, please. But also I want to draw your attention to the fact that this is less well known often, but Indonesia has also ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and children with disabilities have an extra strong version of this right. It says that they should enjoy it on an equal basis with other children, and that they should be provided with age-appropriate assistance. So it's not just that we want, you know, cities for children. We want cities for all children, including all of our children who have disabilities. Next slide, please. So Saddam mentioned I'm the author of something that is known as the Lundy Model. I didn't call it the Lundy Model. The Irish government called it the Lundy Model, but here we are. Everyone else calls it. And it is widely used, including by UNICEF and others in developing child-friendly cities. Next slide, please. So where it came from was really a study in my own country in Northern Ireland over 20 years ago, where we talked to children about whether they felt heard, and they didn't. And they said, and what was surprising me was that the adults we spoke to said that they were listening to children, that the voice of the child was really important to children. And I started to think that this language of voice was a problem because it really was an imperfect abbreviation, and it was undermining this really important human right. So next slide. I wrote an article called Voice is Not Enough. I still really believe that message. Voice is not enough. It's not enough to just let children speak. And I suggested that if we want meaningful child engagement, we need more than voice. We need space and voice, and we need audience and influence. And this is the depiction of the Lundy model that is widely used. It was created by the Irish government. They have a national strategy on child and youth participation, and they also have a national framework which conceptualizes child participation. And those can be really important in helping a country understand what it means. Next slide, please. So for me, a few years ago, I had a light bulb moment about the relationship of my model. And essentially, it's this. The condition of space creates the possibility of voice, and the condition of audience, how we create audience, creates the condition for influence. So what we want is voice and influence, and how we get them is through creating the right spaces and the right audience. Next slide, please. So just really briefly, I'm going to talk about the 4 concepts and show you some examples. So spaces, we have to actively create it. Obviously, if children get together and come and talk to their leaders, municipal leaders, and say our city's not working, they must listen. But those leaders must also go out and actively create the conditions where children are asked what they think. Those spaces need to be safe spaces, that children shouldn't feel scared or frightened or get in trouble if they say what they think, which is, you know, an issue everywhere. And thirdly, one of the most challenging issues that it's inclusive. This is a right of all children without discrimination. And our concern is often we only talk to certain children and many children do not get heard. Next slide, please. So two of the groups of children, I've already mentioned one that don't get heard are children with disabilities. So we need to take active extra steps for children with very diverse disabilities. And secondly, the very young. You know, the babies and toddlers of Indonesia are affected by your cities, you know, and there is some really lovely work across the world, and I hope in Indonesia, looking at how babies and infants, like maybe 2 and 3, experience their community and experience their city. This is a nice example from Scotland, which has a charter on the rights of babies. So it's really important that we don't just think this is for 10, 12, 14. Next slide, please. I think we need to mute someone, maybe. I think voice is the second aspect of it. And clearly it must be voluntary. It's a right, not a duty. I'm going to mute the person, I think. I can do it. It's voluntary, that they don't have to do it, but if children want to, we need to create those possibilities. This is the interesting one, choice and mode of expression, and I have seen really beautiful examples across the world in cities, because it's not just speaking. It might be drawing, it might be music, it might be theatre. There are so many ways of expressing. And also then for me, a big issue has been supported to understand their views, which I'll say something about. Next slide, please. I want to show you this example from Malta. I have been working with the government of Malta. You can check out the Empowering Children's Participation in Malta. They have created an app, and it's on the computers in school, and children can contact their government with their issues, with their concerns, with their suggestions for policy. But why I'm showing you this is look at the ways they can do it. They can do a voice message, they can upload a video, they can send a drawing, or they can just type, you know, so you can see that that suits children in different ways. Different children will be comfortable in different ways. Next slide, please. And then I said about information. For us, the right to information is a prerequisite of the right to be heard. Children can't express a view if they haven't been given time to form a view. And that is absolutely dependent on child-friendly information. You know, so and it's a really good mark to me of a city. If you go in and look at the website, is it accessible to children? Is there a children's section telling them about what they can do and how they can complain, for example, about their city? I have written guidance for the European Commission on how to do that. I mean, in some ways, this guidance has been overtaken by AI, because one of the things you can do is put it into ChatGPT and have a prompt, write this in a way that a 10-year-old understands, but that's still not good enough. I mean, AI is not good enough, but it's a good start. And then what you must always do then is check that with children. Check they actually understand it, and that is their language, because they don't speak our language. They speak their own language. Next slide, please. Audience, this is moving off to the obligation to hear. Obviously, active listening, and we're really bad at it. Adults all over the world are bad at good listening of children and young people. But for me, the most important thing is that it gets to the right decision makers. Who are the people in these communities with the power to bring about change for children? And we need to get children's views there. And sometimes that requires formal channels of communication. We can set up advisory groups, we can set up councils of children, but we need ways they can be heard by the right people. Next slide, please. And then finally, influence, which is what we want. We want children's views to be impactful. I think people sometimes think they will ask for too much and they will be unrealistic, but I think that's okay. The job of adults is to be realistic, is to say, not to shut them down, but to be honest and open about what's possible and what's not. And one of the best ways we do that is through our feedback and our follow-up, how we respond to children who have given us their views. Next slide, please. Oh, so this is an additional framework I developed for influence, for feedback. We're really bad at doing it. We take children's views and then we don't tell them what we did. I say when children have taken the time that we need to go back to them quickly, fast. It must be full, which I'll say something about. Obviously child-friendly. They must be able to understand it. That must be in a way they understand, and followed up. We do what we say we're going to do. But next slide, please. And these are the kinds of questions I think city developers and other important people should answer to children. When children tell them what they think, they should tell them what they agree with. I love them to think about what's surprised them, because children and young people will always surprise adults. And once there's a surprise, it means the adult does not understand or have the same experience as the child and young person, and that needs to be understood. Disagree. If an adult cannot do what children want, and this happens, and the adult can be right, it's even more important that they explain why. This is an issue of dignity, equality, and respect, transparency and accountability, and then obviously telling them what they've done with it, what they've decided, and when it will happen. Next slide, please. Here's an example again from Malta. So they have a feedback sheet saying, we listen to your opinion. It's our job to take you seriously. This is what we could do and what we've done, how we'll move forward. This is what we can't do and why. Look how simple and clear this is. Honesty, transparency, accountability. This is human rights in action. Next slide, please. So the appeal, I'm not going to say very much about it. It's a way of, this has been used by the World Health Organization. It's a way of meaningful child participation. Next slide, please. It's a way of asking yourself questions if you do this work. And the Irish government has created lots of really helpful checklists for policymakers. That's the evaluation checklist, asking them, have you done it and how you plan it, which gives, meat and flesh to the Lundy model concepts. And then there's this everyday spaces checklist, which can be used in communities. It's a really simple way, if you're running a group with children, a sports club, whatever, to ask the questions for you. Are you really meaningfully hearing and engaging with them? Next slide, please. And again, here's a little checklist that can be used to ask children, do they feel heard? We need not just to do it, we need to ask them, did it work for them? Did they have enough time to talk? Did they understand the issues? Do they know what's happening? And they can rate it. This was created with children. Next slide, please. And if you want to know more, you can go into this QR. About a year ago, I put it all together in a little infographic and blog, and there's access to all of the resources that I mentioned in the blog. Last slide, please. So that's it. One of the most quoted things from my original article is, it's not the gift of adults, it's the right of the child. If you see this as a human right, and you cannot, Indonesia has ratified it, it's an obligation on all of us. It's not an optional extra luxury for the child, it's an entitlement. And there's no one right way to do it, absolutely not. Depends on the child, the context and the issue, but it has to be done. Thank you, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Lundy. I've learned so many things from your model, from your presentations, and from your arguments about how we need to actually listen to the children. And I want to add a little bit of, from my point of view, especially from someone who is actively on social media. So I graduated from law school and I dedicated my life and also, the everything that I've learned throughout my college year is to become a content creator who become a voice for the voiceless, especially for the children. And one thing that I do agree is that the voice itself, it's not, the end of the everything that we are doing for the children itself. And that is something that is so powerful, is that we need to do something after the voice itself. We need to hear the children. So I want to know from your point of view, Professor Lundy, we as an Indonesian citizen, we are quite aware of how powerful it is, social media for us. The impact and everything is very powerful for us, especially for the younger generation, for the children itself, and also for the parents. And I definitely agree that the biggest responsibilities when it comes to, the children itself is the parents, right? So do you have anything to say for the Indonesian parents out there who always have this kind of mindset that we don't need to listen to our children. We know the best because we are the parents, we are the adult, and the children itself has nothing to do with everything that the children has in their life. So what do you have to say about that stigma, the parents who still have that kind of stigma, Professor Lundy?
It's not just Indonesia. There are many contexts in the world that are exactly the same, and I think sometimes one of the challenges here is that the Convention on the Rights of the Child is misunderstood, and that we set up a tension between parents' rights and children's rights. And actually, it doesn't do that. The Convention also recognizes the rights of parents. They have a very specific right, an important right the child needs to advise and guide the child in the exercise of their rights. That's Article 5. It's really important and often completely forgotten about. So I'm going to set that with you, but it's in line with their evolving capacities. So we need to support parents to understand that they're supporting children in line with their evolving capacities. And as children get older, they assume more autonomy, more agency. Not what you said, this, what if they don't, And I think that culturally, there is this statement in English, which seems to be exactly the same in Indonesia: adults know best. Adults know best. It's a cultural assumption. It's been there for years. Children should be seen and not heard. Every language. I had a Polish friend tell me that in Polish, that's the saying is, children and fishes have no voice. So everyone has a version of this. So it's not true. So we need to educate. I want to start by saying adults know a lot, and adults do know things children do not know. If you have a very young child that needs a vaccination, they maybe don't want to get it. An adult doctor, pediatrician, parent knows they need it. So we don't want to set up this tension. Adults know a lot. But it's a myth that the adults know everything. And the reality is that adults cannot know what children experience and feel. They can't unless they ask them. And so we have a job to do, really, to educate adults, teachers, and others that they're important and they know a lot and they know things children don't know, but young people also know things they don't know. And we need to bring these knowledges together to make better decisions for children.
Exactly, Professor Lundy. Thank you so much. I definitely agree with that. Thank you so much, Professor Lundy, for the insightful presentation. Your presentation, Professor, has helped us better understand, especially me, what meaningful participation truly looks like, and like why children and young people deserve more than just symbolic involvement in like decision-making process. Thank you so much, Professor Lundy. Now, thank you so much. Now, everyone, it is my pleasure to invite our second keynote speaker, Mrs. Louise Stjerne Johansson, who will share her perspective on governments, institutional design, and also practical approaches to building child and youth-friendly cities. Hello. Hi, Louise.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. So thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure being here. So I understand I'm sharing the screen from my side, so just give me 1 second to get that up.
Sure. If you have a problem, we can actually
Yes,
share
I
the
don't know
screen
why
for
that's
you.
always like Zoom and my computer is like they're not best friends.
Okay, it's okay. Maybe Darlene can help us to share Louis'
Yes.
presentation. Yeah, thank
No,
you.
I think I
Sure,
should
Louise.
have it now, I
Oh, you
think.
get. Oh, okay.
No, not sharing screen now, am I? It's very sorry. That should be it, right? Can you see that?
Yes, Louise.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So perhaps I'll just start with a short introduction. I'm the executive director of a fairly new NGO. It's about 3 years old, and it was established in response to this growing demand for support to embed and facilitate children and young people in decision making. And at the time, I mean, there's obviously many organizations, big international organizations working with children and youth. But while this was a growing topic, not many of them had the support to kind of help out with the many other governments and research institutions and civil society organizations that wanted to do this more. So in short, our organization, we mainly work with child and youth participation, or we talk a lot about child and youth governance. We also work with safeguarding for the under 18, also apply to the young people. I think unique about us is we're co-founded and co-governed with children and young people. So that means children and young people, they helped us define what our governance structures should look like. And they help us write the statutes, the purpose of their role. In the end, they opted not to be in the committee, the executive committee with adults. They wanted their own board. So we now have a child and youth advisory board. And so we work quite broadly, as I mentioned, with organizations, academia, civil society. We also work to some extent with corporates. And we help them design and scale participatory models that place children and young people at the heart of decision making. So we have this two-legged approach. We focus on institutions, helping them embed and facilitate child and youth participation in line with international standards. And then we also work a lot with children and young people themselves and help build the capacities and the knowledge about their rights and how they can exercise their participatory rights. I realize I don't think I'm in full screen, so let me just go there. Oh no, that did not. Oh, I'm sorry. What are you seeing now?
We are seeing the third slide, Louise.
Excellent. Oh man. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. Is that fine? Because then the last time I spent 15 minutes getting this up on Zoom. Okay, so today I've been asked to talk about the 3 pillars of sustainable child and youth-friendly governance framework. So everything I'll speak to right now, it's overly simplified, so bear with me for that. But if we were to pick 3 pillars of, and here focus on sustainable governance framework that involves children and young people, we would focus on the institutional commitment and political leadership, awareness and capacities, and then the opportunities and the platforms for creating them for children and young people. So when we have this long and complicated name in our organization where we talk about governance, I think we wanted to send a message with that we talk a lot about participation, obviously, and but what we have seen in the past couple of decades is there's been a fairly big investment. It's growing, thankfully. But there has been a lot of focus in capacity building awareness, which is incredibly important. And but there's been limited focus on institutionalizing this commitment. And we have many organizations reaching out to us and saying that we're doing participation, but we're not really sure what to do. We invite children to come and share what they have on their heart, their priorities, their needs, but we don't really know what to do with all of this information. So what we work a lot with is trying to, like on one side, secure that institutional commitment, and also always, like not always, but ensure that there is that hook into existing political processes or any decision-making structures, right? So participation doesn't, like even at city level, it doesn't have to be within the local government only. It's important because a lot of important decisions are being made there that impact children and young people, but there's also a lot of other places within across the city where this can take place. So this means that in ways of doing this, a lot of this is happening through dialogue and finding those champions within local governments and within other local institutions that are ready to have this engagement with children and young people and champion it. And then so have it, and this is typically through one or a group of people somewhere within the local governance. But starting with that, and then with that entry point, then exploring how this can be embedded more broadly. So policies and strategies could be one place. We also have local ordinances, so like legislation at the local level in some countries. And like developing action plan can be another lighter model to get it started. But what you can see here is like getting this commitment into writing. So to ensure that there is that accountability and a plan to make it happen. And then in addition to that, a commitment of budget. I'll talk a little bit about that later. There are many different ways of doing this. This doesn't have to be incredible amounts. But what we often see is that, when there is a written commitment of doing something, it's quite often that the practitioners that are being asked to do this, they are being asked to do it within their existing work, which is already a full-time job, and without any budget that gives them very little flexibility to actually do something that's meaningful. And then it can just be, any sort of decision-making processes and related accountability mechanisms. So focusing at the local level or within a city, what does this process look like? And what you can see here is something that, again, this is all overly simplified. I have 15 minutes, but a process typically start with defining when the decision is made to have establish a process or a mechanism or a platform to involve children and young people, it's really important to decide by starting with what are we hoping to achieve? Why are we doing this? And this is really critical because quite often everyone thinks they want the same when they do child and youth participation. And quite often you would find out that there are very different perceptions of what child and youth participation mean. Laura gave some good examples. I did some work in Philippines where everyone wanted to do child and youth participation, but they had to be 18, so no longer children. And because the argument was, just to give another fun example, that Filipino children, they're very small, and so therefore they weren't big enough. Like so Filipino children, like Filipinos in general, but Filipino children were really, really small, so would not be able to participate. So you hear many of these funny arguments. And these were people who wanted to do child and youth participation, right? But then when there's also different ideas of what this actually means and how much influence children eventually will be granted. So, and this is where we move towards what we call the situation analysis. This is typically just like an analysis, like a little bit of a SWOT analysis of the environment in which this would take place. It would also typically what we do stakeholder consultations. So amongst the decision makers, where we try to get them one and establish with them, what are you hoping? Like, why would you want child participation? What are you hoping to achieve with it? And this is very important because this is where we explore what are the different expectations. And we also advise that some kind of stakeholder consultations are being done with children and young people to understand what they are hoping to get out of that. And based on that, on that mapping of expectations and also of needs and opportunities and of risk, etc., then you have all the information you need to move towards the planning and the budgeting. And so this is the planning and the budgeting. This could be here. You could be develop like the planning can take form of either, as I mentioned, like policy, strategy, an action plan. The action plan is a lighter. It can be a process on a specific service. It can be an urban planning project. But what's really important is here that you get a plan into writing and you have an allocated budget. With this, we always recommend starting small because there's nothing more discouraging than failed project. And then when you have the plan and the project, then there is an implementation phase. And here it's really important to monitor what's going well, what's not going so well, which can then inform the eventual evaluation. And like something you'd often hear Laura say is, it's still a field where we're learning a lot. And it's so important that we I think what you say, Laura, is learn then do better. That we gather all of these learnings that both like what is working really well and have them written up and discuss them and consider them, but also what have the challenges has been. Because then you would then go into the next cycle, and when you would do another participatory activity, you can use this information to improve the work you have. We're an organization, we do nothing but this, and we do this every time and write up our learnings. And we also do this learning process with the children and young people throughout. Okay, so the second one, awareness raising and capacity building and accountability. This is pretty straightforward, but what we hear, even in the city context, where we see some of the best child and youth participation practices, as Ireland is probably a very glorious exception, but we hear that from the practitioners working directly with children, they have very little training and capacity building. And it's some quite basic stuff. They would not know a lot about children and human rights. So the context in which the participatory rights being born, they may be familiar with Article 12, but perhaps not so other to the other related rights. Safeguarding is something that is very little awareness around. So both prevention and case management, making sure to have a policy and a protocol in place. How to do monitoring and learning in a way that isn't overwhelming. And particularly like overcoming attitudinal barriers is also how do we work with that? How do we convince city levels officials that this is a good investment of their time? And then again, resources are always required. As I mentioned before, many of the practitioners and professionals working directly with children and young people, they have very little financial means. They don't have like the human resources support to do it, and they don't have often the time because they're asked to take this on in addition to the work that they already are doing. So it's and this is where I think civil society organization, they can do an incredible job also to continuing and making sure that this is happening, and having champions like Laura being out there and speaking to governments and other actors, making them understand that this is something they should invest in, is really critical that we continue doing this. And so the other component, obviously, to create these meaningful and diverse opportunities and platforms for children and young people to influence opportunities. So normally when I'm invited to talk about this, I obviously talk to length about Laura's model. Another model I also like to show is Jarrison Lansdowne. So one person both Laura and I work very closely with. She's developed this 3C model, so the 3 types or approaches of consultations, and which I think is really helpful, because quite often the question we get is like, do we need to have a city council? And how do we make sure we have a city council that is very inclusive of all children, or very, have these represent the broader group of children within cities, and this is a problem. So this is why this model I think is really helpful. So here you see the different types. Years ago, another model was very popular, which was more like a staircase. where you would start with tokenism, like the big bad, and then consultation was like, you could start with that, and then you could move towards collaboration, and the gold medal ideal would then be child and youth-led participation. So this model takes a very different approach and say all of these different types of participation, they're very legitimate. And very briefly, consultations, they are adult initiated, led and managed, but they have a lot of value in terms of securing reach. And so this can be both surveys. We hear from many children that they're happy. That's the way they like to engage. They like to have an opinion, but they don't like the face-to-face engagement. They particularly do not like to sit in these like councils. And surveys allows them to still have a voice and influence decision making. If you want to use consultations to include reads and reads seldomly heard, then it's very important also to combine this with focus group discussions. And here, what we typically try to do is then to engage. So if you're at the city level, engage actors that work with these seldom heard groups around setting up these focus group discussions. And this can be a very helpful way to really make sure you adapt the settings and the process that the meetings are convened in a place where they are comfortable. It can also make sure that they'll have the supporting adults they feel comfortable with, and like these institutions or local organizations, they can really help take into considerations the special sensibilities that may be in specific groups.
Right. Okay, Louise. I'm so sorry to intervene your time.
It's time.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Let me finish this one. I'll be very quick.
Sure,
Okay,
Louise.
great. I appreciate it. No, I have no sense of time. Okay, great. So collaboration, really important. So here you're moving towards, which can be the child and youth councils, and here you're more in the collaborative space between adults and children. And then lastly, you have these children and youth led processes, which are controlled by children and young people. So for us, and I think this is very important, if you want to do citywide, like develop models for like that are city wide, it can be really helpful to apply all different models, but have child and youth led, because if you want to have this engagement with authorities or in any institutions, you will need to be in the co-created space, so in collaborations. But within that, you can create child and youth-led models. Then I'll just very quickly show you these 9 requirements that Laura also used in the context of her model. So I know I joined a bit later, may have spoken to them already, but they can be a good way of ensuring quality insurance. So I'll stop sharing there, and apologies for going beyond time.
Sure, Louise, thank you so much. We definitely learned a lot from your presentation and also from your perspective. One thing that I'd like to add a little bit is that the key point of collaboration is very important when it comes to, for the children itself, is that we need to work together in order for us to maintain every children's needs and every children's perspective and also their stories. We need to give them the space and also everything that they need. And I want to ask this question, Louise. From your point of view and also from your experience, what is the most difficult parts when it comes to collaborating, especially for the parents? Because I've talked to Lundy before that many parents are having this kind of, especially in Indonesia. Lundy mentioned before that there are many adults and many parents, not only from Indonesia, who has this mindset of like, adults knows the best, parents knows the best. So from your perspective, what is the most difficult aspect when it comes to collaborating, especially with parents, when it comes to, giving the right for the children? Louise.
I don't necessarily think it's the most difficult. I just think it's not done enough. And I think what we need to, I think here in many ways, we're working with changing mind shifts. It's like we're introducing democracy below the age of 18, right? And that did not go quickly anywhere in the world, right? So I think we need to work with the attitudinal barriers of the government. We need to train and develop the skills and capacities of children and young people, but we also need to factor in the parents in this. And I think having this quite often when we engage children and young people, we have sessions with the parents. They have many questions. And I think, and we talk to them about quite often we try not to have parents at the meetings. So we have these meetings where because they can be, perhaps it can be more difficult for children and young people, or children in this case with the parents, to express themselves as freely. And so we'll have a pre-meeting with the parents where we explain to them about the process, both the purpose, the process, and the outcomes. And then we like answer all questions they may have. And also, a part of this is also talking about why it is important. And I think this is the same discussions we have with all stakeholders that are required, the whole ecosystem around children, teachers, decision makers in local governments. And it's about how we can make sure so children have a right. That's one thing we need to not forget. But also the importance of child participation in making sure that they get the services and support they need to develop, learn, and reach their full potential. So in the school setting, there are emerging evidence that by giving children a voice or more agency in the school setting, it directly impacts their motivation to go to school and learn. And if you want to develop a special service for children, I mean, there's no way we can make sure that meets the needs of the children, unless we understand what their needs are, right? So it's quite a developed field. Like whenever a product is being developed, you do this kind of market research with adults, right? I mean, that is not how we want to see this, right? And then I think when you have these discussions, like and you listen and you respectfully, answer all the questions, we are moving past this. But I think just so often we're not. We're just asking parents can you take the consent form, and they feel disregarded and they don't understand. So we need to take the time.
Louise, thank you so much. We definitely learned a lot from your perspective and also your presentations. But I'm pretty sure a lot of people in this room is very curious to know more about the topic that we're talking about from Professor Lundy and also from you, Louise. But before we are moving to our question and answer session, I would like to apologize to Louise and London also for all the participants because I have to move to another agenda and also another event. So for our Q&A discussion, I'm going to give the floor to Darlene, who is going to, continuing to be the moderator for our next question and answer session. So thank you so much, Louise and Professor Lundy. Thank you so much for your time and also for the insights. I've definitely learned a lot. Without any further ado, let me give the floor to Darlene. I'm sorry, Darlene, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sadam, for leading the moderator session so well. And I think we have already learned so much from Louise and also Professor Lundy here. And maybe before we go into the Q&A session, maybe just one question for Professor Lundy as well. We have already discussed that children should be given the rights to have a democracy where their voices are heard by the community and also by the government. But how can we design cities that are safe for children without being overly restrictive of their need for unsupervised exploration and agency? Maybe that is one question that people would have when they want to design a city for children, but they are also afraid because children they haven't had their brain developed maturely. So how do we put that in mind, and how do we design cities that supports that?
You want to go ahead, Laura?
I was going to let you do that, Louise. You're the expert on the cities, but I can follow up. Yeah.
Sorry. Then can you repeat, Darlene? I just had yes, sorry. It was about this meeting. Could you repeat, please? Sorry about that.
Yep,
Oh, I
yep,
can
yep.
pick up.
Mhm,
Pick up if you want. It was really the balance between making sure that if you're designing with children, that they're still safe. And there seems to be, Darlene, an assumption around incompetence on children that they don't really understand. Yeah, is that the question? Yeah.
Yes, that is correct. How do we
Yes,
balance
it
both
was
of
really
them?
that participation protection balance,
Mhm.
I think. And I mean, Louise is the expert on child-friendly cities, and I'll pass to her. But I will say that this tension is a tension always in child participation as presented. And again, as I said earlier, I think sometimes that it's overstated, because the truth is that if we want really good cities for children, they must be safe cities. They must be cities where they're protected from harm. Okay, and you cannot do that if you don't talk to them. You just can't. You don't know what the harms are from their perspective. You know what the harms are from your perspective. It might be traffic or strangers, but children will have other harms, that you don't know. And so again, I don't think it's an argument for not doing it. I think it's an absolute argument for making sure that they're
Ah,
involved. But I'm passed to Louise because she'll have many more examples of what that means in practice.
okay, thank you so much, Professor Lundy. What about
I'm
you?
very sorry, Darlene. It was an urgent message about my children, but my husband is on it. Sorry.
No worries, no
On
worries.
first. Yeah. Okay, great. Yes, no, I could not agree more with Laura. I think it's often used as an excuse not to do it. The way we approach it is we say never participation without safeguarding, and that just, but we should, I mean, and that's sadly not like I talked to like 4 different organizations yesterday, and they said they only work with young people aged 18 and above because they knew that they had to do safeguarding and they don't know how to. So safeguarding, keeping children safe during participation, it's not rocket science. It really isn't. It's just something, it's quite new. And even the most prominent organizations only really started investing in this very few years ago, right? So what's important is, like I talked about a situation analysis, but always do a little bit of like a risk assessment before any process. Are there any risks? If they, like, what is our plan to prevent them? And just having some measures in place to react. So safeguarding is another discussion, but as it's quite often used as an excuse also not to go ahead and do it, quite often what we do also, as Laura perfectly said, we talk to the children. And we talk to them about how they understand, like what potential like risks they see and how we could counter a potential risk. But it's really, really important to have these conversations and not just storm ahead. Don't use it as an excuse, but always make sure to have that moment. And then I think us as a civil society, right now, we see a lot of organizations fighting over the most purest safeguarding standards and being very critical. Or this is not the highest standards. And I think it's creating a lot of anxiety. We should not. We should really go the opposite. And then we should focus a lot on being, having these discussions. Like whenever we do capacity building and awareness raising, we should always include child participation. And then really critical, one thing I didn't get to talk to before is like we always work full cycle with children and young people. This is something that was recommended by the Committee on the Rights of the Child. But most importantly, children and young people, they always recommend it. They want to be involved in the design phase where you plan the things, and also the way you develop the code of conduct and the safeguarding considerations, then obviously in implementation. And then any kind of like follow-up, which is like, which Laura spoke to a lot, the accountabilities, getting back to children, informing them, but also doing the eventual evaluation with them. And by working with children, what I can also say, we always establish different communication challenges. Children is they're a very diverse group. and they communicate differently. Typically, what we have, whenever we have an event, we have one safeguarding person. So that's a person who wears like t-shirt, so they know that that's the person they could go to. And they know who they can complain to as well. So they get pictures and contact details of, so that should they get upset with the safeguarding person, they can contact someone about the safeguarding person even. There will be a compliments and complaints box. So should they wish just to dot it down and go and throw it in the box, if we have like, and then we make sure to read that. We also have an anonymous online feedback mechanisms. And then we always also, in addition to that, we recommend to the children, if you're not comfortable coming forward, talk to an adult and have that adult come forward. So we have these different ways. Some are very extrovert. They'll just come and say like, hey, this is not like, you can improve this, you know? But others are just much more comfortable. We never get, like, very rarely get anything through the anonymous, but we sometimes do get like little written messages in the boxes, and sometimes it's just a lot of compliments, but it can also be, whatever they may have on heart and suggestions for improvements. Does that make sense? And I think at city level, it is important to have that in place as well.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much, Louise, and also Professor Lundy, for the very comprehensive answer. I think that really explains it, that it's not a reason to not do it, but it's actually a reason to do it and to involve the children and also the youngsters in our communities to design a safe city for them. So I think we will go straight to the Q&A session. If there are anyone in the participants who want to ask some questions to Louise and also Professor Lundy, please feel free to raise your hands because we will have a few minutes for you guys to ask some questions directly. And if not, if you are incapable of unmuting your mic, you can also type in your questions in the chat box below, and maybe I can read it out and also let Professor Lundy and also Louise to answer it. Okay, we have one raised hand over here from Kak Rani. Hi, Rani. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Okay. Yes. You can directly ask your questions.
Okay, thank you so much. So thank you for the committee for bringing all the experts together here. So actually, this session is the most weighted session for me, as I also learned the models when I studied in the UK. So while coming back in Indonesia, I know some practices that would be my question here, especially for Professor Lundy. And as we do understand that usually the adoption of the model should be contextualized, as we know that different countries have different contexts, right? And could you please share good practices where the model have addressed gender and social norms, especially to address and support girls' agency, because we know that we come from different backgrounds, different identities, and also we know that stakeholders, practitioners, children, and young people also have different capacities and also backgrounds. So thank you.
Oh, sorry, Professor. I think you're still muted.
Yes, thank you, Rani. Thank you for an important question. And I mean, obviously, I didn't have a lot of time, but that last slide, I showed a kaleidoscope, and it was to say, you know, there is no one right way. And context is everything. Which children is everything. Which decision is. So it changes by the child, by the country, by the context, by the issue, whether it's a girl. And there are lots of really lovely examples. I'll give you one from Ireland, and then I'll give you one from elsewhere. I mean, in our work in Ireland on education, our most deprived community are called Irish travellers. They're like Ramah. And it was really clear we could never speak to Irish traveller girls if there are Irish traveller boys there, because the cultural norm is they don't speak. The boys speak. So you have to create girl-only spaces for them, for sure. And then I have a very large project at the minute, Louise knows about, in Palestine, and we're supporting Palestinian researchers to promote child rights and child participations. And of course, there are cultural and gender norms there about who speaks and when, and we must be respectful of that. But I'm going to give you an answer, Randy. It sounds so simple, but it's the answer to almost every child participation question. one of the first things that we do when we want to create the safe and inclusive spaces is we ask those children what they are for them. Yeah. And for some children, that may be with adults present. Like, for example, if you're talking to Maori children in New Zealand, you know, they often want to be in the context of their whānau, that's their community and their adults. You just need to ask and know. And there's no one right answer. So the model has been adapted and used very differently in very different places. But thank you for the very important question.
Thank you so much. And perhaps if Louis have a say also, as you are also supporting, like the governance about the meaningful participation of children and young people, as we know that a lot of countries also have parliament as well, and also a short forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rani, for also asking such an interesting question. I hope it answers your question. And thank you so much for the insight from Professor Lundy. Okay, I will also ask the audience if there are any of you who wants to ask questions directly to Professor Lundy or to Louise. Please feel free to raise your hand because I think this is such a good opportunity for you guys to ask questions and also to get answers directly from the experts as well. So, are there anyone who wants to ask some questions? Maybe I will wait for around 1 minute if any of you wanted to ask any more questions. We still have space for maybe 1 or 2 more questions from the audience, so please feel free to do so. You can raise your hands or you can type in your questions in the chat box below. Okay, we have one person here from Litara Foundation and also Kak Liza. Hello, Anna. How are
Hello.
you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for the such inspiring sharing. My question is short. I'm talking about the agency, especially for girls, uh, in the particularly uh, marginalized one. Is there any best practices that you've done how to nurture the agency for girls who comes from the marginalized place or condition? I ask to the both panels. Thank you.
Okay, maybe Professor Lundy or Louise, you can go first. Which one of you?
Louise, go first.
Louise, okay.
I think one thing, so there are many barriers to participation, and the biggest one, which I think you all bring up, is that of attitudes, right? And that's the most challenging one. And again, I think here a lot, the solutions lie in sensitization. I don't know, do you actually say that in English? I think so, yeah. But not sure. But I think what I will say, it's a challenge, and a lot can be done in managing and facilitating these processes as well. So whenever we have, and again, I'm just like, girls can be one of these groups, but there are other groups that are seldomly heard that you need to be aware of. So doing what we call the situation analysis, we always try to map what are the seldomly heard groups, because we know one of the biggest challenges as we have with participation today is inclusion. Typically, we see a very specific profile of children involved quite often, sadly. So this is something we have a lot of learning to do in this field. During the situation analysis, and this can be something short and light, try to understand, and typically children are very good at helping understand what are these groups of children that are not heard as much, right? So this is sometimes, an exercise we do with them as well. And then define who they are, and then have this discussion in the group about how can we create that safe environment within this specific process where everyone can speak. So we typically invite the children themselves, and this is a process we guide a bit. We know some minimum things we'd like to see, but we invite the children to develop their own code of conduct every time. So they ideate and they write down a list of what can be done, and then we ask what can we do to make it inclusive, and then they come up with a number of things so that is one thing we do. The reason why I mentioned that as an example, because it works well, because when you work with attitudes, you work with awareness raising and learning, and I really think here that the participation with the younger, we need to work a lot younger as well with participation than that we do today, right? Like we in our organization, we believe that you can start this already at the age of 3, like starting exercise, like talking about children about you have the right to express yourself, but you also, the other person also have the right to express yourself. You can start with these kind of like collective decision-making processes already in that age. And this is where we can sensitize not only like girls about their right to speak up, but also we need to work a lot with the male gender in understanding the importance of creating this space. So when we do participation work, we often have very open discussions, and it's really interesting seeing also that we've had situations where we had to separate as well. But we also had situations where they decided to have their participation together, and we just agreed we need to, but girl has just as much speaking time. And then to see the dialogue the exchange that they had amongst the girls and the boys play out about why this is important. And it was just something I did with Jairus and Lansdowne, and it was in the Emirates. And it was so interesting. You could just see the boys several times like, that actually makes sense, and they would laugh about it. So I think we have an amazing potential working with the younger generations in helping them be sensitive and understand the importance, both from a rights perspective, but also from other perspectives.
Oh, okay, understood. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Kak Ana? Is that good enough?
Yeah, actually, yes. Maybe later I'm going to ask another question, but let's listen to Professor Lundy. Maybe I got some link of there in the chat box.
Yes, yeah. And I sent some a guidance that we produced working with Louise's Child Advisory Group, and it's a
Okay.
really nice toolkit that can be adapted in different contexts, and it's really going to children and saying to them, what are the decisions in your life that matter to you, and how much say do you have currently? Do you get no say? Do you share the decision with the adult, or do the adults decide, and where do you want more? And we find it to be a really nice way of finding out what really matters. And it goes back actually to Rana's question, we need to know from them what matters to them. And it's a lovely starting point, and I encourage you to look and adapt it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
After
so
that.
much, Professor Lundy and Louise as well. I have already just clicked on the link that Professor Lundy actually shared, and I think it's very interesting. I will take a look at it myself after this. But maybe we'll have one more question from the audience today for the last question. We have Jeffrey here who are raising his hand. Hello, Jeffrey. Are you there?
Hello.
Hello.
Lundy, and hello, Louise. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. So my question is, in Indonesia, there is a lot of children being hindered and being blocked in order to pursue their dream on education because of economic and social issue. And because of economic and social issue also, there is a lot of children being criminalized by their own closest environment. even by their parent or their teacher. As a civilian, as the ordinary person, is there anything concrete action that I able to do to make sure that children in the future time able to feel the safety and prosperity in their own environment? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Maybe we can share with Professor Lundy first.
Yeah, no, I think thank you for that insight. And, I appreciate that here in Indonesia and in many countries, there are children in that position. I'm really thinking about your question because, of course, in my expertise, human rights promises are made by governments, they're made by states. So I always look to them and work with a lot of governments to remind them, this is your job, it's your job. But you raise a really fundamental point, because as I understand it, you said I'm a civilian. What does an ordinary person do here? And it's not your job, it's government's job. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't all work towards the promotion of human rights. There is a more general obligation on us all. So I suppose I don't know who you are or where you work, but everyone in this room has attended because they're interested in children. So every single one of you somehow works with children, has children in your neighborhood. And I suppose if you can do what you can in what we call the small places, so you can't necessarily change the law, the criminal justice system, the education system, but you can work in your own immediate environment. And sometimes that's all we have. And sometimes when I'm having a bad day and I wonder the state of the world, I do think today I can relationally make it better for another human being. So I urge you all that when you meet the children in your lives, wherever you meet them, professionally or personally, that you remember that you too can seek their views, listen, be respectful, engage, support, inform, suggest ways in which they can be. And sometimes it's not enough for children living in deep poverty and being criminalized. Yet, in our study with children in the criminal justice system across the world, so often that act of one adult making them feel heard is such a powerful thing. So I'm going to give you that. It's not your job, it's the state's, but we can all make a difference to individual children or groups of children wherever we are.
Thank you, Professor Lundy. I think that is really such an inspiring answer. I believe that every and each of one of us could have the power to change what we have in our hands. It's not our job to control the government, but we can surely make a change wherever we are by applying those things in our daily life. And I'm sorry, due to the time limitation, I think the Q&A session will be closed currently. And at last, I want to say thank you so much for Professor Laura Lundy and also Louise for generously sharing your knowledge, your experiences, and perspectives with us today. Maybe the audience, we can all give a round of applause for them because they have come from way on the other side of the world and we are able to hear from their expertise. It's truly an honor to have you guys here with us today. You have truly inspired us to rethink our cities, how to make them more inclusive, more participatory, and also more welcoming for the generations that come after us. And before we move on, please don't forget to fill out the feedback form that we have for this panel session. And we will also share the link in the chat box down below. It only takes a moment and it is your key for receiving your e-certification as well. Now we will have a short break before we move on into the workshop session. So once again, thank you so much everyone and also Professor Lundy and Louise for attending the session and also making the time to share your insights to all of us here in Indonesia and also in other parts of the world. And friends, we will have a short around 10 minutes break and we will have the workshop session on 15:45. So you guys can grab a drink, you guys can grab a snack, have a toilet break, and we will come back for the other workshop session. So once again, thank you so much and see you in the workshop of panel 2. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lundy and also Louise. See you next time. Have a good day.